How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you back to our Season 7, Week 13 NCAA recap show. Your Pitt Panthers coming off a dramatic 38-35 victory against the Syracuse Orange, buoyed by a 4-touchdown performance from quarterback CJ Kirk and, of course, a game-winning field goal by all-day Johnny Midday. Dramatic game. Obviously, Syracuse really put the screws to us in the fourth quarter. Dramatic 3 touchdowns, including 2 in the final about 6 minutes of the game before the Panthers completely chewed up the remaining 2:45 of the clock with a game-winning drive that saw some incredible conversions. I think that was the big thing to take note of late in that game was the creativity. You know, Davion Reynolds had a nice run, a couple nice runs. CJ Kirk with the beautiful little throw to KJ Welsh, who was able to come off his route and offer support. And then, of course, the big conversion to Ceno Rogers to get us the final first down inside the 10 and make it a chip shot for Johnny Midday. We were both teams perfect in the red zone in this game. 8 red zone touchdowns in 9 trips, so neither defense with a lot to talk about there. But CJ Kirk, 317, 3 touchdowns, no picks, which is great to see, and he was only sacked once, so one of his most complete games of the season. Ran for a touchdown as well. Really, really great game. No turnovers for the Panthers. Davion Reynolds, 136 yards, and not a single run of 20 yards or more, which means he was just consistently churning out 6, 7, 8 yards at a time. Did unbelievable for us. And then Ceno, not a huge game for him, 6 for 80. Just consistent, and of course he made the big catch right at the end. KJ Welsh with a touchdown. Christian Klump had a huge first half. Keith Onyango with a pretty wild stat line, 4 catches for 15 and a touchdown before leaving with an injury. Really just a solid performance overall. KJ, he had a really underwhelming start to the season, but he's come on of late. Christian Klump's been fantastic. I don't think he had a catch in the second half, though, which is a bit disappointing, but he had 4 for 85 just in the first half. Could have been his first 100-yard receiving game, just missed out on that. Bordeaux with another sack because he's a fantastic, fantastic player. Darion Mitchell with 3 tackles for loss. We know how good he's been. Granger could have had 2 interceptions. He did have 1. Kenton Hill, take a look at that. Doesn't have a tackle or anything, but he does make a deflection, so great to see some of the youngsters getting involved, especially with the fact that we're missing our top corner, Damian Vector. That means these players such as Matt Wright, our young true freshman safety, Marquise Walker, redshirt senior, who doesn't get a lot of playing time. You got Kenton Hill as well, redshirt freshman. Those are all guys that are going to get a little bit more game time because of the fact that, you know, we need that quality put into the team. And so, or I should say, we lost that quality in the team with Damian Vector going out, and so we need our depth to come up and really have a big performance and make some moves for us and be very notable. So huge game for the Panthers. Big victory to stay unbeaten and go to 11-0. This is the farthest we've ever gotten to a season undefeated, so that's already just a huge turn of events for us here at Pitt, and the markings of what could be a really tremendous, spectacular season. Already have clinched the berth into the ACC title game, we know, but a lot of stuff still to play for as the season goes on. Looking around the ACC, the remainder of the games, Miami, our opponent this week, beat Virginia, so they're coming off a victory. Virginia Tech escaped with Army. Florida State blew out Louisville. Boston College beats Wake. Georgia Tech wins a tight one over Duke, and Clemson goes to 10-1 with a blowout win over NC State here. You can see it started out with 3 touchdowns in the first quarter, and it just kept rolling from there. Florida State here, big win, 34 points in the first half, and then it was all over just like that. We look around the top 25. Louisiana improves to 9-1 with the victory over newly FBS promoted Appalachian State, their first season in the division. They've had a good year, but Louisiana has been very, very solid. South Carolina goes to 10-1 with a victory over Ole Miss, team that went to the national championship game last year. That's going to set up a massive matchup between them and Clemson this week. Indiana upsetting Ohio State. We mentioned it in the Syracuse game. We saw that in an in-score update, but what a win for Indiana. Rutledge, not a great game passing, but he does run for 2 touchdowns in the upset. D.D. Harris for Ohio State, not one of his better contests as the Buckeyes fall out of both college football playoff contention and Big Ten title contention. Because of that loss, they maybe could have gone into the Big Ten championship game with a tiebreaker. They're not going to do that anymore. with this loss. USC 23-10 over Colorado. They bounce back and go to 8-3 on the season. That's going to set up a huge game with UCLA this week that we'll talk about. Cal goes to 9-3 with a win, drops to 9-3 with a loss to Stanford. Stanford on upset watch the last couple weeks. They beat Notre Dame, they beat USC. And now they beat Cal in a huge matchup here. J.J. Thurman with a couple of big games there. Fry struggle. That probably is going to knock him. He's been in the Heisman race for most of the season. That's probably going to knock him out with that loss, being on at this point, just 9-3 Cal team. We know how that usually goes for the Heisman. Ball State keeps their unbeaten run going with a win over Bowling Green. They go to 27-10. And then the big news of the week, Cincinnati, who looked like they were a shoo-in for the college football playoff if they could go 12-0 because of how good they've been all season, how dominant. Cinderella finally loses her glass slipper. The Bearcats lose, and not down to the play of A.C. Reese, I'll tell you that right now. Tremaine Humphrey, the running back for Tulane, one of the leading rushers in the country, 155 yards on the ground for him. Unbelievable performance. A.C. Reese did all he could. 237 passing and 2 touchdowns, 185 passer rating, and then he runs for 54 and a touchdown as well, but he did have 2 fumbles in this contest that end up costing Cincinnati the game. So they did all they could, but they fall to Tulane, and they're likely not making the college football playoff anymore, even if they win out, especially because they won't have a conference championship game. Penn State beats Nebraska 28-21. Big win there. Nebraska had to use 2 quarterbacks owing to injury. Marquez Gordon in the Heisman race didn't have his best game, 71 yards, did throw a couple touchdowns, but had some picks as well, and that could be a matchup that we could potentially see in the Big Ten championship game replay itself if results fall in a certain way. Alabama 28-14 over Florida. They continue to keep their hopes to maybe sneak into the college football playoff as an at-large alive with a big win there. LSU blows out Texas A&M, a team that you think might have been good, 6-4 at the time, but LSU just dominates them, 52-21. Colacolio, 2 touchdowns, 389 passing. Bo Brown with 150 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. He's in the Heisman race for sure. Jacoby Sutton, 11 catches for 186. Just an incredible team all around. So many talented players, and probably the favorite for the national championship as it stands right now. Western Kentucky loses to Middle Tennessee State. A little bit of an upset there. Texas beats Arizona. Tennessee 20-10 over Tennessee rival Vanderbilt. Oklahoma 31-0 over Kansas State. Taylor Savage with just 2 touchdowns, so that might hurt him in the Heisman race. Baylor 30-24 over SMU. Washington escapes upset alert against Oregon State there. The Beavers tried to come from behind late, but Washington holds them off. Tristan Richards, 4 touchdowns in that victory for the Huskies as they go to 10-1, and they're definitely the Pac-12's biggest prospect for the college football playoff. But for the Panthers, disappointing week on recruiting fronts. A lot of guys that left were guys we didn't have scholarships offered to, but the big one we missed out on is Maurice Smith, the defensive tackle. He visited us during our win over North Carolina. We thought that would help us out. We had the inside track, but he visited Penn State this past week, and he decided to sign with the Nittany Lions following that visit. So we do miss out on the 4-star, number 6 defensive tackle from Lower Borough, which is Pittsburgh suburb, and so unfortunately missing out on a guy on our own backyard. Decides to go to Happy Valley and sign with Penn State, so a bit disappointing there, but you can see when we look at our recruiting class, still a lot to be happy about, and we do still have a couple of prospects that we're very interested in, but we do miss out on a defensive tackle. We did get a couple of defensive ends. We have James Oliver already in this class at defensive tackle, so we're still pretty strong there, and the only defensive tackle we're losing is Bordeaux, but that's the way things go sometimes. Alex Smith decided to go to Boston College, outside linebacker. Looks decent, but we do have Whitfield in this class. We do have a couple of outside linebackers that we're already happy about. Chad Campbell as well, so we don't miss out there. John Bain decides to go to Cincinnati, following A.C. Reese to go there. But he'll be the backup. They have Joey Williams already, and we have 2 quarterbacks in this class. Bain's not better than either of them, so we're not missing out there. David Jackson, guard. He was somebody I added to the board very late, and we weren't able to sign him, unfortunately, which is a shame because he doesn't have he's 69 overall, is not bad, but he was a +7. Could have been a gem. I don't know why he didn't show up as a gem. So miss out on him, unfortunately. And Smith, this is a huge miss for us. 81 overall. He's projected as a 76. He comes out as an 81 +5 gem. Already was a 4-star recruit, and now he's a gem that we miss out on. 84 tackling already. Great finesse moves, decent speed for a defensive tackle and a big body. This guy could be unbelievable. Really, really talented. Could be the next Aaron Donald with his body size. He's basically the same shape as Aaron Donald, maybe a couple pounds heavier, but that's a huge miss. The other guys, best of luck at your schools, but Maurice Smith was one we would have loved to bring to campus next season. Unfortunately, we won't, and we may have to see him in the future in non-conference play. But players of the week, Jackson Stevenson, 3 sacks, forced a fumble, 6 tackles for loss for Michigan State in their win. And then Jaden Maxwell Jr., #1 quarterback in the recruiting class last season. The guy's unbelievable. I think he's 88 or 89 overall. We'll see it here in just a second. He's had a decent season for UCF. He's 91 overall. Unbelievable. Very mobile, great passer, really balanced. He's had an okay season. He's a guy that, when he signed with UCF, it was a very interesting signing, so we'll see how that pans out for the rest of his career, but very talented player overall. And then for us, CJ Kirk, our super sophomore quarterback, 4-touchdown performance in the win over Syracuse, gets him ACC Offensive Player of the Week. And Antonius Williamson, who dominated us, another huge game for him. He's up to 11.5 sacks on the season now with a 3-sack performance in the win over Duke. This guy's playing his way into a first-round pick role. He's been unbelievable. 2 sacks against us, if you remember. Darion Williams Jr., top of the Heisman race right now, but Marcus Gordon, the Penn State quarterback, is in there. Justin Martin, the Ball State running back for the undefeated Ball State team. He's right there. Fry didn't drop down, but I don't see him as a serious threat for the Heisman. And then Bo Brown now into it with a huge 150-yard plus performance in LSU's win. He's quietly had a very good season and got himself into Heisman contention. I think Kelly Colio and Taylor Savage, the 2 quarterbacks from LSU and Oklahoma respectively, are in there as well. But with 2 huge losses in the top 10, let's see how things shake out now. Cincinnati completely drops out of the top 10 overall. You can see Ohio State's dropped out as well. They're down to 12th with their loss. Cincinnati's down to the 13th. So it makes the playoff pretty interesting. We still have 8 one-loss teams in the NCAA. Ball State undefeated, but I don't think their strength of schedule is going to get them anywhere near the college football playoff. Cincinnati at least has looked so dominant and was so good last year as well that they could have had a sniff at it. Ball State's not going to have that. So I think when you look at the top 4 right now, you're looking at LSU, Pitt or Clemson for sure, because they're going to play each other in the ACC championship game. Penn State's right there. Oklahoma and Washington are right there. Any of those teams, if they win their conference championship and win out, they're all in the mix. If a couple of those teams stumble, if Alabama can win out and finish their season 11-1, I think they're somebody that could get in with an at-large bid, but they do have a tough rivalry game coming up this week. We look at the Coastal here. Your Pitt Panthers, 7-0 in conference, 11-0 overall, but we will be taking on a difficult to play Miami team. They've only given up 182 points on the season, very good defensively, and so we may have our work cut out for us. We'll be taking on Clemson, who of course already done with conference play, but a gigantic non-conference matchup coming up for the Tigers to lead them. Basically, they have playoff games the rest of the season is the way you can look at it. Same with Pitt, to be perfectly honest. ACC play, though, this week, Georgia Tech rivalry game, Virginia Tech rivalry game, Northeast rivalry between Boston College and Syracuse, Florida State, and then the in-state South Carolina rivalry showdown. Clemson heading to Columbia to take on South Carolina. Both teams 10-1, and with conference championship and college football playoff hopes, that's going to be an unbelievable contest between those 2 schools. Top 25, the rivalry matchups are off the chart. Ball State looking to stay unbeaten as they take on Ohio here midweek. Texas taking on Texas Tech. The Longhorns looking to go 9-3 and keep themselves in contention, I think, for the Big 12 championship game if they can win a tiebreaker. Penn State taking on Maryland to try and go to 11-1 and get into the Big 10 championship game without any kind of blemishes. Michigan, Ohio State. If Michigan wins and Penn State loses, I think Michigan will have an opportunity tiebreaker-wise to get into the Big 10 championship game. So still a lot to play for those schools in the game, as they're both still top 15 teams. Kentucky, Tennessee, great matchup here. That'll help the Panthers' resume if Tennessee wins. UCLA, USC is going to be a fantastic matchup because winner of that game goes to the Pac-12 championship to play Washington. So obviously huge implications there. Florida State, Florida, as we already mentioned, huge rivalry game. Florida State's look very good this season. I like them in this matchup, though Corso is going for Florida. Bama, Auburn, the Iron Bowl. Obviously, we know how much of a big matchup that is. Auburn, 7-4 this season, but Bama, they're trying to play to keep themselves alive. They're going up with one of the top offenses in the country, especially rushing the football, against one of the better rush defenses and defenses overall in the Auburn Tigers. They're going to try to shut down Heisman contender Darion Williams. LSU looking to stay perfect in the regular season as they take on an underwhelming Arkansas squad. Washington trying to go into the Pac-12 championship game with a lot of momentum as they take on Washington State in the Apple Cup. That's a great rivalry. Indiana taking on Purdue, little in-state rivalry there. Indiana actually having a quietly very good season in the Big Ten. Oklahoma State's going to be a massive contest. The winner there is going to go to the Big 12 championship game because Oklahoma State would get the tiebreaker over Oklahoma if they do get the win. Oklahoma, whichever team wins here, win and they're in. Offensively, both teams have been very good, but Oklahoma's been one of the best teams in the country. They're defending national champions. How can you pick against them? And then, like we mentioned, Clemson, South Carolina. This is a game where South Carolina's 10-1, but if you look at their, measurables and their team stats, they haven't been great. I mean, they've been solid. They haven't been great. Clemson's been unbelievable. The best passing offense in the country. I like the Tigers in this one. Notre Dame, Stanford, another great rivalry game. And then Cincinnati will take on Navy, trying to bounce back. But for your Pitt Panthers, we're heading to Coral Gables to take on the Miami Hurricanes in what should be a really tough match. Miami's defense has been unbelievable this season. Look at that. Number 3 pass defense in the country, plus 11 turnover differential, number 9 overall defense. And they're just very talented overall, and that's an issue where, you look at what they could do. Their offense has actually been fairly underwhelming, which is surprising because they have Travis Bolden at quarterback, 96 overall. Their running game's very solid. They have a lot of talent across the board, and so they're a team that any week in or week out, they can end up putting together a really good performance. You look at their schedule, of course, they got obliterated by Virginia Tech away from home. They lost to Syracuse in what was kind of a crazy game, but otherwise they've been very, very solid, and they've put in pretty good showings. Travis Bolden at quarterback, like we mentioned, 26 touchdowns, but he does have 12 picks, which is a bit surprising for a quarterback of his caliber. Tavon Murphy at running back is very solid. Travis Simpson, David Franklin are some of their top receivers, and defensively they have a lot of talent as well when we take a look at their roster. So a lot of good players on this Miami team. For your Panthers, just a check-in on our leaders. Davion Reynolds did go over 1,000 yards in the victory last week, so that's great to see. 1,000-yard campaign first of his career. Ceno Rogers, just 152 yards from a 1,000-yard campaign this year. You'd expect him to get that with the Panthers having at least 3 games to play still in this season. And of course, Kirk, he's the man. In this matchup, though, the Panthers still going to be without Damian Vector, their number 1 corner, who's out for the season with his broken elbow. Miami likely will have Tommy Webb in the matchup. He's coming off of broken ribs, but he should be back for this contest. And when we look at this Miami team, they do have some top-end talent. A lot of guys to watch out for, especially a quarterback-wide receiver combo here in Franklin and Bolden. 2 really good defensive tackles, so that's going to put a lot of pressure on that matchup between Luke Davis, the Panthers' star center, and some of those Miami interior defenders. And I mean, like we mentioned, they just have a lot of talent. Bolden's very good. Ruffin as his backup is going to be a good player as well. Junior, he'll likely be starting next year, but Bolden's been unbelievable throughout his career. He's a very talented player, one that's going to go to the NFL next year more than likely. But bit of a down year for him as far as the ball control's been concerned. A lot of interceptions, not as many yards as you would have expected from a player of his caliber. Tavon Murphy, solid. Siegel behind him, 2 strong seniors that they're going to lose. So might feel like a lost season for Miami. They do have Kyson Ward, who's going to be their starter more than likely next year, is a good player, but losing 2 really speedy, good, solid contributors in the running game is disappointing for them. And I mean, David Franklin, what more can you say about him? 96 speed, 91 overall. The guy's unbelievable. What's crazy is he only has 11 yards a catch. I would have thought he'd have been much better as far as, yards after the catch, just deep balls, things of that nature. They really haven't utilized him, so you can honestly probably blame the play calling for their play more than anything else. Blake Ingram's a player to watch here, really talented freshman, 80 overall already. He'll have an impact next year for sure. Jerome Minor at tight end, Jamal Clancy, some good young players there that you'll expect them to keep. So remains to be seen. Depending on what their quarterback position can do next year, Miami could still be a factor to look out for. But some talented players on the line. 86 center, they got an 80 in Eric Maddox. 86 at right guard and a junior, so he'll be around more than likely next year. 84 overall senior in Dawson, but Omar Alexander's redshirting, and he'll be a 80-plus overall junior next year as well. Sam Walker at left end, 7 sacks on the season, 89 overall, very talented player, one to watch out for, because Miami, the biggest area they can get pressure is their defensive line. Tyrone Harris at right end, 83 speed for a defensive end and 88 overall. He's a fantastic player. And then through the middle here, Nate Parsons, one of the best defenders in college football on the defensive line. Mitchell as well, very, very talented with the top of their defensive line. The front four is unbelievable. They're going to give the Panthers fits, you would expect. So that's the big play that could really get pressure on CJ Kirk. Cook and Fontenot, unbelievable players. DeMarcus Cook, though, sensational senior. He's a top, day 1, day 2 draft pick for sure from Miami. Unbelievable player there. And then Cole Stover. Their 3 senior linebackers are all sensational. 88 plus overalls for all 3 of them. This Miami defense, you can see why they're a top 10 defense in the country. Stevenson as well as a backup there. The only area where they maybe have a bit of weakness is at the cornerback position and in the secondary as a whole. Cronin and Webb as your top 2 corners. They are juniors, so they'll more than likely be back next year. Same with Scott at free safety, another junior. So you can expect Caleb Hadley may go to the NFL draft. He's a redshirt junior at 89 overall. He's very, very good. 4.5 sacks from safety. Is a fantastic, multi-talented player. He gets down near the line of scrimmage very, very well. But that's the area where you can maybe exploit if you're the Panthers, is their secondary, probably their biggest area of weakness. But overall, the Miami defense is unbelievable. Their offense is solid. They have some good talent, some good speed, but defensively it's going to be the issue. So I could see a defensive battle in this matchup, no doubt about it, if they can shut down some of the Panthers' big skill players, if they can get after Kirk and force him into some mistakes, which he has not been making the last few weeks. That's the biggest thing with CJ Kirk. He's been protecting the football much better in the last few weeks of the season. So let me know your score predictions in the comments, guys. As always, hail to Pitt. We'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.